Здравствуйте! Как дела? Я надеюсь, что у вас все хорошо, и сегодня мы с вами начинаем урок номер 25. В этом уроке мы будем с вами повторять очень много вещей, о которых вы сейчас узнаете. So here we are, starting our lesson 25. We are going to do quite a bit of review for past tense of the verb идти, to go, and its derivatives like пойти, to get going, уйти, to leave, that's kind of new, прийти, to arrive, to come. Хорошо? Кроме того, мы с вами еще раз посмотрим, как работает короткое прилагательное должен. We'll see once again how the short adjective должен works. И кроме того, мы с вами еще начнем дательный падеж местоимений. And we will start with the dative case of pronouns. So, here are our objectives. Посмотрите, пожалуйста. Past tense and also introduction to the future tense of the verb идти. Пойти, прийти, уйти, etc. Dative case of pronouns, and we'll barely touch on должен. One should do something. Хорошо? В первую очередь давайте с вами посмотрим этот самый важный глагол движения. Let's start with that most important verb of motion, verb of going, идти, to go. Хорошо? So to go, imperfective. Идти, to be on your way someplace. Хорошо? And you know precisely how to conjugate it. Я иду, ты идешь, etc. Хорошо? Now we're going to add some prefixes to it, such as па. We change the e part a bit. We turn it into пойти, to get going, to set out. That's perfective, to go. Хорошо? Пойти. Хорошо? I need to go. Мне надо пойти to a particular place. Хорошо? Ну что ж, затем у нас с вами есть глагол прийти, to arrive, to come. Хорошо? So, прийти, we did exactly the same thing. We took идти, got rid of id, and replaced it with y, and came up with пойти. Хорошо? As you remember, of course, past tense of идти, to go, since it does not end in P мягкий знак that we can just get rid of and put ЛЛ there, that past tense is a little bit strange looking. What we do is use completely new set. Посмотрите. We have шел. Хорошо. He was going, for example. Шел. Feminine шла. Neuter шло. And plural шли. Хорошо. Those шел, шла, шло, шли are the ones that we are going to use for the past tense of the verbs with prefixes as well. So if пойти is perfective of идти, then пошел is perfective of шел. So he went, he got going, он пошел. Хорошо? Она пошла. Оно пошло, like the time started going. Время пошло. Хорошо? And they went, they set out, они пошли. Хорошо? Exactly the same thing with to arrive, to come. Хорошо? Пришел. Хорошо? Он пришел домой, he came home. Хорошо? Пришла. Feminine. Пришло. Neuter. Пришли. Plural. Очень хорошо. Ну что ж, конечно, вы помните, как спрягается глагол идти. Of course you remember how идти is conjugated. There it is. Я иду. Ты идешь. Он идет. Мы идем. Вы идете. Они идут. You knew that since last year. Please pay attention to what we've got here. The u, yosh, yet, etc. Those endings are very predictable. And what's also going to change once we go into the prefixed ones is the e. We will replace it with y. Хорошо? And that's what we've got. Посмотрите. I will go. I will set out. Is я пойду. I'll go. Ты пойдешь. You will go. Хорошо? Not you are going, but you will go. Ты пойдешь. Он пойдет. Мы пойдем. Вы пойдете. Они пойдут. Хорошо. What is happening here is we have something that looks like present tense, but we're doing it for a perfective verb, and we know that there is no present tense for a perfective verb, so пойти then is future. As a result, я пойду, I will go. Они пойдут, they will go. Хорошо. Once again, let's see how идти is conjugated. It is идти, right? Хорошо, я иду, ты идешь, он идет, она идет the same. Мы идем, вы идете, они идут. Now we are going to replace that e with Хорошо? To turn it into arrive. Хорошо? So, I will arrive. I will come someplace. Я приду. Хорошо? Ты придешь. You will arrive. Он придет. Хорошо? Мы придем. We'll come home at 5 o'clock. Мы придем домой в 5 часов. Хорошо? Вы придете. Когда вы придете на работу? When will you arrive to work? Они придут. Хорошо? So basically what we're doing here is something extremely simple. First of all, for the past tense, we took the past tense of the verb идти, which is шел, шла, шло, шли, and added the prefixes that we needed to it. Пришел, пришла, пришло, пришли, or пошел, пошла, etc. And when we did the same thing for the future tense, for пойти and прийти, we were exactly doing the same thing. Посмотрите, we had the идет, added pa to it, and turned it into пойдет, he will set out, or придет, he will arrive. Хорошо? Ну что ж, давайте мы с вами это повторим, используя упражнение 12.4.5 на странице 210. Let's review that with the exercise 12.4-5, B part, on page 210. Посмотрите, пожалуйста. Петя went в детский сад в 9 часов и came домой в 4 часа. So he went to the kindergarten. It's a guy we're talking about, right? Петя is a boy, so Петя пошел, хорошо? And then пришел, хорошо? Так, теперь давайте посмотрим номер 2. Галина Васильевна went to work at 7. Past tense for Галина, feminine, so пошла, хорошо? We're taking the verb пойти and putting it in the past, matching the gender of the noun. Галина Васильевна пошла на работу and came to work at 8 и пришла на работу в 8 часов. Хорошо? Номер 3. Мои братья, my brothers, went to school. So since brothers is plural, we use пошли. Хорошо? And пришли домой только в 5 часов. And came home, пришли, because it is plural. Хорошо? Посмотрите, пожалуйста, номер 4, number 4. Где Борис Владимирович? Where is Борис Владимирович? He went to the institute. Он, that's masculine, so we are using он пошел в институт. Хорошо? Number 5. Где ваши сыновья? Where are your sons? Они еще не came home, еще не пришли. We're using plural. Хорошо? They haven't come home yet. Отлично. Номер 6. Молодой человек и девушка went в театр. Хорошо? So young man and the girl went to the theater. Plural for the two of them. Пошли is what we do. And the last one. Когда Антон came home, когда Антон пришел домой, Вера уже приготовила обед. Vera has already made dinner. Lucky Anton. Хорошо? So when he got home, past tense, masculine, пришел. Очень хорошо. Надеюсь, что вам это помогло. И теперь сверх этого я хотел бы кое-что добавить. I'd like to add something on top of it. We had the verb идти, we had some of the derivatives пойти and прийти. Now another one, уйти, to leave. All we're doing is adding у to идти, changing the dt to y, and coming up with a new verb to leave. Уйти. Хорошо? Past tense is very predictable. We take past tense of идти and add у to it, and we get он ушел. Хорошо? Она ушла, etc. So past tense. Ушел masculine, ушла feminine. Neuter is going to be ушло. The time has run out. Время ушло. Хорошо? Ушли, plural, is the past for the plural form of уйти, to leave. Хорошо? Где они? Where are they? Они ушли. They left. Хорошо? Достаточно просто. And just as predictably, the future tense is formed. We take идти, something like я иду, ты идешь, and adding у to it. So then, I will leave. Я уйду. Хорошо? Ты уйдешь. Он уйдет. Мы уйдем. Вы уйдете. You will leave. Try saying that as a cute sound to it. Вы уйдете. You will leave. Хорошо? When will you leave? Когда вы уйдете. И они уйдут. Хорошо? They will leave. Они уйдут. Очень хорошо. So, now you've seen some verbs in the past, in the present, and in the future forms. That's basically all there is to Russian verb structure. It's very easy. You will never have to deal with things like I will have been there. That still blows me away. English is much harder as far as the verbs are concerned. Хорошо? Ну что ж, let me remind you about something. Должен. One should. One must do something. Хорошо? Short adjective which matches the gender of the noun that it goes with. Хорошо? So he must. Он должен. Хорошо? Plus an infinitive usually. Like he must go. Он должен идти. Хорошо? She must. Она должна. So since она is feminine, должна is the feminine form there. Хорошо? It must. Оно должно. Хорошо? They must. Они должны. They mustn't. They should not. Они не должны. Да? Хорошо? They should not leave. Они не должны идти. Очень просто. Pretty easy stuff. Хорошо? One more thing I'd like to do with you is review our vocabulary. The vocabulary from the shopping dialogue. Fruits and vegetables. Хорошо. ТДА, посмотрите. Продукты. Трава. Травы. Plural. Кофе. Овощной суп. Овощи. Грибы. Огурцы. Помидоры. Капуста. Лук. Морковь. Перец. Чеснок. Фрукты. Сливы. Груши. Яблоки. Апельсины. Хурма и бананы. Очень хорошо. Ну что ж, еще раз это повторив, давайте с вами в последний раз посмотрим наш замечательный диалог о покупке продуктов. Let's look at our wonderful dialogue on shopping for groceries. One more time. It might be last, but who knows? Such a good dialogue. Пожалуйста. Здравствуйте, Татьяна Викторовна.
Здравствуй, Дима.
Как поживаете?
Очень хорошо, здесь очень много новых продуктов.
Серьезно? И что у них нового сейчас?
Вот всякие травки, кофе, грибы.
И огурцы, помидоры,
Я собираюсь
смотрю.
сделать овощной суп, очень хорошие овощи. Капуста,
что у них
лук,
сегодня?
морковь, перец.
Понятно. Понятно.
И фрукты.
Чеснок есть у них свежий, нет?
Чеснок есть очень хороший, органический.
Хорошо. А фрукты какие, вы не смотрели?
Сливы, груши, яблоки.
Хорошо, я вот
Очень
тоже
хорошие.
собираюсь купить, может быть, яблоки, хурму.
Апельсины.
Апельсины хорошие тоже. А бананы у них есть?
Нет, не видела.
У них никогда нет бананов почему-то. Ну ладно, ну спасибо, всего доброго.
Хорошего.
До свидания. Очень хорошо. А теперь давайте мы с вами сделаем кое-что совершенно новое. Now we're going to do something completely new. We're going to go back to the book, page 208. Dative case for indirect objects. Dative case of pronouns. What exactly is this about? Dative case? We don't really have all of those various cases in English. In Russian, you actually have 6. Хорошо? We know accusative case, which is the direct object. We know nominative case, which is the subject. And now we have indirect object being expressed by dative case. Here's the deal. You've got a book that you're reading. Хорошо? You're the subject. The book is the direct object of your reading. Now, if you have somebody that you're reading that book to, that person is the indirect object of your reading the direct object. Now, isn't that confusing? But actually, it makes a little bit of sense. Take a look at the examples that were given there. Посмотрите. I'm looking at the middle of the page, 208, where it says dative case for indirect objects, and it's кому Анна Петровна это сказала? Literally, to whom did Anna Petrovna tell this? So, what she told was this, это. Хорошо? To whom is the indirect object of Anna Petrovna telling it. Хорошо? So the person that is intended to receive the direct object, information mostly, or an actual thing, you know, giving a gift, helping, giving help to somebody. The person that is receiving the direct object would be called indirect object and would be expressed by this dative case. So what we've got here in this example is кто, who, turning into кому, to become to whom, for whom. Хорошо? And the answer to that is мне. Хорошо? To me, for me. Not me as, do you know me, me the direct object, or I as in, я не знаю, I don't know, but мне, to me, for me. Хорошо? There is a difference in English as well, so that shouldn't be very hard. Let's look at the next example. Мама готовит нам обед. Mama is cooking dinner. What she's cooking is the direct object, accusative, and she's cooking it нам, for us. Хорошо? So, we turned into нам to become indirect object, for us, to us. Хорошо? Следующий пример, посмотрите. Маша показывает им квартиру. Masha is showing the apartment to them. Хорошо? So what she's showing is an accusative case, квартиру, and the people that are looking at it, the ones that she is showing it to, are the indirect object in the so-called dative case that we're just starting to learn now. Хорошо? So Masha показывает нам квартиру, to us, им квартиру, to them, тебе, to you, etc. You will see all of them very soon. Посмотрите. Final example. I bought you a book. As you can see, it's a little altered from the book. I bought you a book. Я купил тебе книгу. Хорошо? Тебе is for you, to you. Хорошо? So, what I bought is a книга. Direct object, книгу. I am the subject. Я, хорошо. The person that's receiving the book is the indirect object. Dative case, тебе. Хорошо. Let's get specific here and actually see how that works. Хорошо? Посмотрите, пожалуйста. So from я, I, we go to мне. Мне is to me, for me. Хорошо? Ты, you, informal becomes тебе, to you or for you. Хорошо? Он, he, becomes ему, to him, for him. Хорошо? Она, she becomes ей, for her, to her. Оно, it, becomes ему, just like masculine. Хорошо? Еще раз давайте мы с вами это посмотрим. Let's stay there. We've got мне, to me, тебе, to you, ему, to him, ей, to her, and ему, to it. Хорошо? Now the plurals, посмотрите, пожалуйста. We've got нам, to us, coming from мы, we. So we and to us, мы versus нам. Хорошо? Вы, the formal you, вам. Хорошо? To you or for you, formal or plural. Хорошо? Они, they, becomes им. Хорошо? To them. And finally, кто, who, was in our first example becoming кому. Хорошо? For whom, to whom. As in, кому Анна Петровна это сказала? Whom did Anna Petrovna tell that to? Мне, to me. Хорошо? Those dative case pronouns, and just in general, dative case, the indirect objects, work extremely well with a certain number of verbs that require the concept of giving. Хорошо? Of course, if you give something to somebody, the person that's receiving it is going to be the indirect object. Хорошо? You could also give help, give a word, give something. Take a look at some of the examples that we've got there. Right there at the bottom of page 208, it gives you some verbs that really like having dative case indirect object used after them. There they are. Говорить, to tell, сказать, to say. I'm putting them in the imperfective versus perfective forms. Хорошо? You tell something to somebody. What you tell is the direct object. The person that you're telling it to is the indirect object. Хорошо? Dative case. So, Also отвечать, to answer. You also answer to a person. Хорошо? And perfective ответить. Хорошо? So, she answered to me. Она ответила мне. Хорошо? Another example that we've already seen an awful lot is рассказывать. And рассказать. Хорошо? To be telling a story, to narrate. Рассказать. Очень хорошо. Еще один пример, конечно. Another example is читать versus прочитать. Хорошо? What you are reading is the direct object. The person that you may be reading to is the indirect object. Хорошо? So, she's reading a book to me. Она читает мне книгу. Хорошо? And the final example is улыбаться. Улыбаться is to smile. In English we say, I smile at her. Да? Я улыбаюсь at her, maybe direct object. In Russian, it's as if you're giving a smile to the person. Хорошо? So for some reason, it's dative case. Улыбаться takes dative. Хорошо? Ну что ж, let's go ahead and see those datives once again with their English translations. Посмотрите. To me, мне. To you, тебе. To him, ему. To her, ей. To it, ему. Хорошо? And the next bunch, посмотрите. To us, нам. To you, вам. To them, им. And to whom, кому. For whom, to whom. Хорошо? Я надеюсь, что вам это помогло до какой-то степени. I hope this was helpful to a point. It's going to be explained in a lot greater detail in the next lesson. We're just getting started. But I am asking you to do the exercise. Хорошо? We will go through it next lesson though, so that you know for sure what it is that you're doing. Хорошо? One more thing that I'd like to bring back up is the imperfective versus perfective. I'd like to remind you that imperfective is usually used in simultaneous actions. Хорошо? Things happening at the same time. Like, while I was reading a book, she was watching TV. Да? Когда я читал книгу, она смотрела телевизор. Both things happening at the same time, imperfective, emphasizing the process. Хорошо? And then perfective we use in the consecutive actions. Хорошо? I finished reading my book, she finished watching TV, да? Both are complete, single complete actions. Хорошо? Ну что ж, давайте посмотрим с вами... Да, кстати, we use когда to both indicate when as in while something is happening. Хорошо? And also when as in after something happened. Same as in English, да? Хорошо? When I was watching TV, she was reading a book. When she finished reading the book, she started doing something else. They mean two different things. Хорошо? And you had to do that on page 210 in the exercise 12.45, the the part, where it was extremely easy to just take two sentences, rewrite them using когда, but it was also crucial to understand what it really means. I'd like to make sure that you know what it means. Хорошо? Посмотрите. Number one, I will simply give you the finished product and the translation to make sure you know what's happening, and please try to repeat it with me. So, когда Вера готовила обед, Антон смотрел телевизор. Simultaneous. While Vera was cooking dinner, Anton was watching TV. Number two, когда Вера купила рыбу и хлеб, она пошла домой. When Vera bought fish and bread, she went home. That means after she did that, she went home. Consecutive. Хорошо? Вадим выступал по телевизору. Вадим was on TV. Когда Вадим выступал по телевизору, соседи смотрели его передачу. When Vadim was on TV, the neighbors were watching his show. Хорошо. And the last one we're going to do is number 4. Когда Вера почистила овощи и рыбу, Антон пришел в кухню. When Vera was through cleaning the vegetables and fish, Anton showed up in the kitchen. That Anton is just, I don't know about that guy. Хорошо? Doesn't help out much. So, I think you get the idea. Before we call it quits for today, I'd like to show you once again the days of the week and then later on introduce the names of the months So, days of the week first. Посмотрите, пожалуйста. Понедельник, please say it with me. Понедельник. Вторник, Tuesday. Понедельник, Monday. Вторник, Tuesday. Среда, Wednesday. Четверг, Thursday. Пятница, Friday. Суббота, Saturday. Воскресенье, Sunday. And once again, понедельник. Вторник, среда, четверг, пятница, суббота, воскресенье. Хорошо. Now, let's look at the names of the months. Посмотрите, пожалуйста. Январь. Январь. Try saying it. That's what we're doing. We're practicing, we're getting acquainted with it. Then we'll do massive amounts of work on it later. Январь. Февраль. February. Март. March. Март. Апрель. April. Апрель. Май. May. Май. Июнь. June. Июнь. Хорошо. И дальше посмотрите, пожалуйста. Июль. July. Июль. Август. August. Август. Сентябрь. September. Сентябрь. Октябрь. October. Октябрь. October. Хорошо. Ноябрь. November. Ноябрь. Хорошо. И, наконец, декабрь. Декабрь. December. Декабрь. Очень хорошо. Please note that all of those winter months, the cold ones, декабрь, ноябрь, etc., end in this brr. Хорошо? So, that's one good way to remember it. Хорошо. We're talking about seasons. We talked about shopping for fruits and vegetables. Here's a saying that combines the two. Literally it says, to every vegetable its own season. Всякому овощу свое время. Всякому овощу, to every vegetable. Let's look just at that part. Всякому овощу, to each vegetable. That's dative case, by the way. We don't know why yet, and we won't know for a while. Свое время, the second part. Its time, its own time. Хорошо? That simply means everything is good in its season. For everything, turn, etc. Да? Хорошо? Ну что ж, let's see what we did today. Here's the overview. Past tense, introduction to the future tense of those ET verbs, the verbs of going. Хорошо? We looked at the dative case of pronouns. Хорошо? And that brings me to your homework, which is exercise 12.1-2 on page 209. That's the dative case. And the exercise 12.4-5, the verb part on page 210, which is where you rewrite the sentences, make them into complete when something was happening, something happened, or after, etc. Хорошо? Ну что ж, на этом мы с вами закончим. Благодарю вас. До свидания. Здравствуйте! Как дела? Ну что ж, сейчас мы с вами начнем работать над нашим уроком номер 26. We're going to get started on lesson 26, which is more or less an extension of lesson 25 in terms of the material that we're going to go through. Take a look and see what our objectives for today are. Посмотрите, пожалуйста, more on the aspect of the verbs, dative case of pronouns, which we just introduced, months, and now seasons. Хорошо? And of course, we are not going to just drop the concept of ET to go with all of the prefixes that make it into different types of going, like пойти, to set out, to go, прийти, to arrive, уйти, to leave, etc. They're so similar. Хорошо. But we are going to start with reviewing dative case of pronouns. And of course, dative case is what you need to use for the indirect objects. For, let me put it in the grammatic speak here, for the recipients of the direct objects. Хорошо? A few examples, посмотрите, пожалуйста. Но до этого давайте мы с вами все их посмотрим. Let's first see all of them together. Посмотрите. To me, мне. To you, тебе. To him, ему. To her, ей. To it, ему. Хорошо. И затем to us, нам. To you, plural or formal, вам. And then to them, им. Хорошо. To whom? Asking that question. Whom is this for? To whom did you tell that? Кому? Хорошо? As in, кому Анна Петровна это сказала? To whom did Anna Petrovna tell that? Хорошо? What she told was это, that. We don't know what it was. Some information that Anna Petrovna, this object, told to the person to whom she told it is the indirect object. The recipient of это. Recipient of that information. Хорошо? Кому? To whom? Очень хорошо. And we answered that мне. Of course, you know that these examples came from page 208. And this is a good time to open up the book over there because we are going to go through some of exercise 12.1.2 in just a little bit. So, next example from there is Mama готовит нам обед. Mama is preparing for us lunch. Да? Mama готовит нам обед. Хорошо? Нам is who's receiving the direct object being обед. Нам for us, to us. Хорошо? Еще один пример, пожалуйста. Straight out of the book, we've got this example. Маша показывает им квартиру. Masha is showing to them the apartment. Хорошо? What she's showing is the apartment. Квартира. Direct object, turn A to U. The people that she's showing it to are the indirect object of her showing. Хорошо? So, Masha показывает им квартиру. And the final example, which I changed from the book, is Я купил тебе книгу. I bought for you a book. I bought you a book. Да? When you say I bought you a book, you didn't buy you bought a book. Really it should be I bought for you a book. I bought a book for you. You don't get confused in English. In Russian, it would be confusing if you made both of them direct objects. It's got to be clear that it's книгу that you bought, the person that it's for is тебе, for you. Хорошо? This direct object, indirect object is actually very useful because you can see how similar they are in the way they are written. Take a look at this table, пожалуйста. Меня is me, as in, вы меня знаете, do you know me? Хорошо? Versus мне, to me. So this should help you remember how to write and say them. Хорошо? Тебя, you, тебе, for you. Его, him, ему, for him. Ее, her, as in, я ее не знаю, I don't know her. Ей, for her, to her. Хорошо? Его is him and, it, and ему is for it. Хорошо? Now the plurals on the question. Нас is us, and нам for us. Вас, you, and вам for you. So it's very similar. The only thing we're changing is just a little bit of the spelling there, right? Их is them, as in как их зовут. What are their names? And then им is for them. Кого is whom as a direct object. Кого вы видели? Whom did you see? Кому is for whom. Да? Кому вы это сказали? To whom did you say that? Хорошо? I just used the verb сказали, told, said. Хорошо? Certain verbs do need the dative case used after them. Some of those verbs are right here. Посмотрите. Говорить, to be telling something. Сказать, to tell it. Хорошо? The person you're telling it to will be the direct, will take the dative case. Хорошо? Will be the indirect object. So these are the verbs. Говорить, сказать, plus a few more. The ones that you will need the dative case after quite consistently. Хорошо? Посмотрите дальше. Отвечать, to answer, ответить, perfective. Хорошо? Рассказывать, to be telling a story, рассказать, to tell a story. Хорошо? Он рассказал мне об Академгородке, да? He told me about Академгородок or something like that. Then читать, прочитать, to read, and the perfective. What you read is the direct object, the person you're reading to, indirect object, dative case. Хорошо? And the final one, улыбаться, to give a smile to somebody. Хорошо? Your assignment for today was exercise 12.1-2. We're going to go ahead and go through it just to make sure you're okay with it. So go ahead and look at the book on page 209, and there's the exercise. Посмотрите. Номер 1. Я говорю здравствуй. I say здравствуй. Hello. Zina улыбается blank. And Zina smiles. I guess she smiles at me. Хорошо? And we know that with улыбается we need the dative case. So literally she gives a smile to me. Мне. Хорошо? Посмотрите номер 2. Number 2. Приходят наши родители. Our parents arrive, come to see us. И мы показываем blank new pictures. And we show to them, I guess. What you show is the pictures. The people you're showing the pictures to are the dative case, to them, им. Хорошо? Actually, you know you're going to be using dative case here. One of those, им, тебе, etc. Хорошо? Number 3, посмотрите. Это Нина и ее брат Максим. This is Nina and her brother Maxim. Nina читает blank a book. Nina is reading him a book, I think. She's not reading him. She's reading a book to him. So, Nina читает ему книгу is what we do. Хорошо? Номер 4 посмотрите, пожалуйста. Number 4. Это Петр Иванович и его сыновья. This is Петр Иванович and his sons. Он покупает blank новое пальто. He is buying them, I guess, new coats. Them, to them, for them is им. And that's what we need. Очень хорошо. Посмотрите номер 5, пожалуйста. Number 5. Когда мы его видели, when we saw him, он сказал blank, что он теперь живет в Новосибирске. Lucky dog. Хорошо. He now lives in the middle of Siberia. And he told that when we saw him, so I guess he told it to us, which is нам. Хорошо? Теперь посмотрите номер 6. Now, number 6. Максим готовит уроки. Maxim is preparing his homework. И Нина blank помогает. And Nina is helping, I guess, to Maxim, who's a guy, so I guess it is to him. Хорошо? Ему. Очень хорошо. Номер 7 посмотрите. Number 7. Когда я вижу Таню, when I see Таня, она всегда улыбается. She always smiles at me, I guess, right? So, улыбается to me, at me, мне. Очень хорошо. And the final one we're gonna do right now is number 8. Бабушка и Машенька сейчас дома. Бабушка and Masha, dear, little Masha, are now at home. Бабушка читает blank книгу. She's reading a book, the direct object. To whom is she reading it? To Mashenka, so must be to her. Ей. Очень хорошо. Ну что ж, а теперь давайте мы с вами еще раз поработаем с видами глаголов. Now we're going to do a little bit more work, mostly review, with the aspects of the verb. Imperfective, perfective. Imperfective is the fact, repetition, the process. Perfective is the result or completion. We use the imperfective a great deal for consecutive actions, especially happening in the past. Хорошо? So, consecutive actions is what we do when you're dealing with something that has been completed and the new action is started, right? Simultaneous actions is what you use for something that is happening at the same time. Хорошо? The imperfective. So, once again, for perfective, you use consecutive actions. Imperfective, simultaneous. Хорошо? We have this wonderful exercise on page 210 that we started with. We went through number 4. That's exercise 12.45. And actual number 5 goes to page 211. You're supposed to connect the two parts using когда. But you have to keep in mind that когда may have two meanings. Когда may mean when, as in while, at the same time, right? For simultaneous actions. Or it can have the meaning of когда, when, as in after. Хорошо? So let's see number 5. Олег показал все фотографии. Олег showed all the pictures. Мы пошли домой. We went home. So when we put it together into когда Олег показал все фотографии, when Олег showed all the pictures, мы пошли домой. We went home. That's consecutive. He did one thing, we got out of there. Хорошо? So, number 6. Когда Олег рассказывал об Академгородке, все его слушали. Now, когда means while. And you would translate that into while Oleg was telling stories about Академгородок, everybody was listening. Хорошо? Number 7. Когда Нина пришла домой, when Nina got home, она начала готовить уроки. Perfective. What we're doing here is the consecutive actions. When she showed up at home, after she showed up at home, she started doing homework. Хорошо? Посмотрите, пожалуйста, номер 8. Когда Нина готовила уроки, Максим играл. Here it's when Nina was doing homework, Maxim was playing. Хорошо? And it really means while she was doing homework, Maxim was playing. We're dealing with simultaneous actions, imperfective. We're talking about two processes happening at the same time. Хорошо? Number 9. Когда мы пообедали, when we finished lunch, пришла наша бабушка. Our grandmother came to see us. Хорошо? Perfective. Когда пришел Антон Николаевич, number 10, он сказал, давайте сыграем в шахматы. So when Антон Николаевич came to see us, he said, let's play chess. Хорошо? He couldn't have said it before he came to see us, right? So we're dealing with consecutive actions. One thing happened, Anton Nikolaevich showed up, and then he said something. Хорошо? We're dealing with perfective, two single complete actions. That is consecutive actions. Хорошо? Now on G, this whole big exercise, 19 sentences, where first you have to choose between imperfective and perfective, and then put it in the correct form. That is going to be pretty challenging. I'll be frank with you up front. Let's see how it goes. Number 1. У вас новый телевизор? Do you have a new TV set? Да, мы его bought в четверг. Yes, we bought it on Thursday. Хорошо? Are we talking about, do you have a new TV set? Yeah, we were shopping for one on Thursday. No. You bought it. You got it. Here it is, right? Single, complete action. So for that, go ahead and choose the perfective, купить, and put it in the past tense. You're saying you bought it. So as a result, what you need is мы его купили в четверг. Хорошо? Okay? Так, делаем номер 2. Number 2. Нина, что ты делала вчера вечером? Nina, what were you doing last night? When you ask the question, что вы делали? What were you doing? You're talking about how was the evening spent, not what did you get done. As a result, when the person answers, he or she is likely to answer in the same imperfective, talking about what was happening rather than what got done. And that's what we have. Я готовила уроки, answers Nina. I was doing homework. Хорошо? She didn't say, I got the homework done. No, I was doing it. That's how I spent the time. Готовила уроки. Хорошо? Номер 3 посмотрите. Когда Вера bought овощи и мясо, when Vera bought the vegetables and meat, она went домой. She went home. Хорошо? Are we dealing with the consecutive actions or simultaneous here? Are we saying that while she was buying the vegetables and meat, she was going home? I think first she bought the vegetables and meat, and then she left. Хорошо? So for that, go ahead and use perfectives in both cases. So then it is когда Вера купила, when she bought it. Хорошо? Она пошла. She went. Хорошо? Теперь давайте с вами посмотрим номер 4. Когда Антон cleaned рыбу, the fish, он начал готовить обед. He started cooking dinner while he was cleaning fish. Maybe it makes more sense to say he got done with the fish and started cooking it. Хорошо? So then it is когда Антон почистил, perfective, with the masculine ending почистил. Хорошо? Рыбу, etc. Number 5. Когда Василий Николаевич came to see us, я asked его, где сейчас его сын Олег. Хорошо? So when Vasily Nikolaevich showed up, I asked him where his son Oleg is now. Of course, he's in Novosibirsk, we know that, right? Хорошо? So, but what it was is, the father of Oleg showed up, and we asked him 2 single complete actions. Pretty simple stuff. So it is, когда пришел Василий Николаевич, я спросил, I asked. If it's a girl saying this, she'd say я спросила. Хорошо? Anyway, now number 6. Когда Антон пришел домой, when Anton came home, он started смотреть телевизор. He came home and he started doing it. Not he was getting started. No, he just started. Single complete action. Начал. Хорошо? Он начал смотреть телевизор. Посмотрите, пожалуйста, номер 7. Number 7. Сначала они had lunch, потом сыграли в шахматы. So first they had lunch and then they played chess. Were they playing chess while chewing their lunch? I don't think so. So must be they finished lunch, пообедали, потом сыграли. Хорошо. Посмотрите номер 8. Number 8 now. Что Галя told you, когда вы asked her where her dad was? Хорошо? Same deal. What did she say, single complete action, when you asked? Just 2 complete actions. Not what was she saying while you were asking. I guess if you wanted to say that you could, but I would just choose perfectives and say, что Галя сказала вам? And then, когда вы спросили ее. Хорошо? Теперь посмотрите, пожалуйста, number 9. Боря уже read «Огонек», pretty good magazine, as we know, и хочет купить другой журнал. So, Боря is through with «Огонек» and wants to buy another magazine. He finished reading it. That's what we're saying. He completed it. Прочитал «Огонек». Хорошо? And the last one for today, out of this exercise, number 10. Когда мои дочери bought everything, купили все, они пришли домой и начали cooking обед. Хорошо? So, when they finished their shopping, use perfective, когда они купили все. They came home and started doing something. They started cooking. Хорошо? Начали готовить. Use imperfective infinitive. Готовить. Хорошо? Is the one you need. Начали готовить. Прекрасно. Теперь давайте с вами сделаем кое-что другое. Давайте повторим названия месяцев. Let's review the names of the months. Хорошо? Вот они перед вами, посмотрите. Январь. This time around, you know how to say them. Please repeat with me. Январь. Февраль. Март. Апрель. Май. Июнь. Июль. Август. Сентябрь. Октябрь. Ноябрь. Декабрь. Хорошо. And here is something new. Let's go ahead and learn the names of the months. Посмотрите, пожалуйста, у нас есть весна. Весна, which is spring. Весна. Хорошо? Лето is summer. Лето. Fall is осень. Осень. Fall, autumn, осень. Хорошо? Winter is весна. Извините. Winter is зима, of course. Хорошо? Зима. Отлично. Now let's go ahead and put some months together with the seasons. And there we are. Весна. Spring is март, апрель, май. Весна. Хорошо? Едем дальше. Лето. Summer is июнь, июль, август. Лето. Хорошо? Fall is осень, and it's сентябрь, октябрь, Ноябрь, it's осень. Хорошо? And the winter is зима. Декабрь, январь, февраль. Хорошо? That is зима. Хорошо. Now, let's talk about temperature here. Here are the seasons and some temperature. Весна – тепло. Лето – жарко. Осень – прохладно. Зима – холодно. Okay, those temperatures correspond with the seasons. Let's read those temperatures once again. Тепло, жарко, прохладно, холодно. Well, what do you think those are? If you guessed that in fact тепло is warm, жарко, hot, прохладно, cool, холодно, cold, you're doing great. Хорошо? So once again, весна, the spring, тепло, it's warm. Лето, the summer, it's жарко, hot. Осень, the fall, прохладно, cool. And зима, the winter, холодно, cold. That холодно sounds pretty severe, doesn't it? Хорошо. Let's see what is happening as far as weather is concerned in different parts of the world. We'll compare the place where we are now, Dallas, with Russia, more specifically the place where I grew up, which was in the middle of Siberia. Хорошо? So temperatures are going to be different. In Dallas it is прохладно, cool in October and Ноябрь, October and November. Да? Then it's холодно, cold, декабрь, январь, февраль. December, January, February. Хорошо? And then it gets warm very briefly in Март and Апрель. Хорошо? It's Dallas. Then it gets hot, жарко, for the rest of the year. Май, июнь, июль, август, сентябрь, октябрь this year too. Хорошо? While in Russia that's a totally different story. Хорошо? In my hometown, where they would only close the school in the winter when it was negative 40 Celsius. Хорошо? Something like negative 35 Fahrenheit. It's a different story. It's briefly warm, тепло, когда? Май, июнь, May, June, да? Хорошо? Then it's жарко, hot, very relatively speaking, in июль, август. Then it's pleasantly cool, прохладно, in сентябрь, октябрь. Хорошо? Then it is холодно, cold, ноябрь, декабрь, январь, февраль, март, апрель. I have actually witnessed snow falling in May. Хорошо? That wasn't fun. All right. One more thing we're going to review before we go is the verbs идти again, to go. Хорошо? So there they are. Just to go, imperfective, идти. To set out, to get going is пойти. Хорошо? To come, to arrive is прийти. And to leave is уйти. Хорошо? They have very predictable past tense. Past tense of идти is шел. As a result, we're going to add all of those prefixes to шел and get the masculine past tense. Хорошо? Посмотрите. Пошел. He set out. Пришел. He came. Ушел. He left. Or simply шел, which is he was going someplace. Хорошо? Feminine, exactly the same way. Пошла. She set out. She went someplace. Хорошо? Пришла. She came. Ушла. She left. And just шла. She was going. Хорошо? Neuter, пошло, пришло, ушло, or just шло. Not as useful as the others. And the plural is пошли, they went, пришли, they arrived, they came, ушли, they left, and just шли, they were going someplace. Хорошо? Now let's go ahead and see how идти is conjugated for the present tense and прийти is conjugated for the future. So, I'm going someplace. Я иду. Ты идешь. Он идет. Мы идем. Вы идете. Они идут. Now let's add the pr for the prefix при, and you get I will come. I will arrive. Я приду. Ты придешь. Он придет. Мы придем. Вы придете. Они придут. Хорошо? And extremely similarly, we've got пойти and уйти conjugated. Just different prefix. I will go, я пойду. I will leave, я уйду. So let's go through the пойдус. Я пойду, ты пойдешь, он пойдет, мы пойдем, вы пойдете, они пойдут, they will go someplace. Хорошо? With an у we have the meaning of leaving. So я уйду is I will leave. Я уйду, ты уйдешь, он уйдет, мы уйдем, вы уйдете, они уйдут. Очень просто. Pretty simple stuff once you go through it a few times. Хорошо? Before we leave, let me give you a saying. It's somewhat timely. Клевета, что уголь. Which means slander is like coal. Не обожжет. If it doesn't burn you, так замарает. Then it will smear you. Хорошо? We've got something like that in English, I think. Something like throw dirt enough and some of it will stick. Хорошо? So, the idea being that if you say bad things about somebody, or actually if somebody says bad things about you, some of them somebody will believe. Хорошо? So let's see the first part here in this saying. Клевета, что уголь. Slander is like coal, да? Клевета, что уголь. Хорошо? Не обожжет. If it doesn't burn you, так замарает. Then it will smear. Хорошо? On that sad note, let me also describe another new gesture to you. When somebody does that, and usually it's going to be somebody young, that means лапша. Хорошо? Лапша, that's noodles. Literally, that person is telling you, you know, somebody's just hanging noodles on your ears, meaning that is not true. Somebody is lying to you. Это лапша. Хорошо? Ну что ж, сегодня мы с вами сделали следующее. Today, we did the following things. Посмотрите. Worked some more on the aspects of verbs. The exercise 12.45 part G. Some of it is still ahead of us. Worked with dative case of pronouns and the whole idea of indirect objects. Looked at some months and seasons. Хорошо? And I'm leaving you with this homework. Посмотрите, пожалуйста. Exercise 12.45, the G part, the whole 19 sentences on page 210. We've gone through 9 of them. Хорошо? And then, of course, you've got the new vocabulary, the months, the temperatures, and the seasons. Хорошо? Я надеюсь, что вам это понравилось. By the way, right behind me, there are 4 little pictures which quite artistically represent the 4 seasons in Russia. Хорошо. Я надеюсь, что у вас все будет в порядке. Желаю вам всего доброго. До свидания.
Welcome to our Russian World Cultural Program. Today we will explore the rich heritage of Russian history. You are probably wondering why we have included a history lesson as a part of our cultural program. Well, you ask such good questions. We have included a history lesson as a part of our Russian World Cultural video, so as a result of viewing it, you will be able to answer 2 questions. Does history help to shape culture, or does culture make history? We will discuss 4 areas of Russian history: the origins of Russia, Imperial Russia, Soviet Russia, and Renaissance Russia. I have invited 4 friends to assist us in our journey back in time. I'd like to introduce them to you now. Cyril, from the origins of Russia, Catherine the Great from Imperial Russia, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin from Soviet Russia, and Boris Nikolaevich Yeltsin from Renaissance Russia. Let us begin.
Hi, my name is Cyril. I'm your tour guide for the origins of Russia because of the unique role that I play in Russian history. It is also my job to unlock the doors of mystery as it relates to the part of Russian history that is not often talked about or is not well known. Who are the Russians? It is important to note that the area we call Russia today was first inhabited by a long succession of people and cultures. The Slav tribes were primarily influenced by the Scythians, the Greeks, and by their Scandinavian neighbors. The Greek colonials were sophisticated, educated, and cultured. The Scythians were illiterate and barbarous, despite being among the world's most skilled horsemen. The Vikings were half pirates and half merchantmen. No neighbors could have differed more from one another. Does Russia belong to Europe or Asia? This is the dispute historians have had for years. Some held that Russia had more landmass in Asia, so Russia belonged to Asia. Some held that since Russia's major cities and political structure existed nearest to Europe, Russia belonged to Europe. Some held that Russia is a part of both. Physically, Russia is so vast that it does lie on two continents, Europe and Asia. Today, the Ural Mountains form the boundary between European Russia and Asian Russia. Even more, Russian culture over the years has been shaped by influences stemming from European and Asian worlds. But it is interesting that many Russians think of themselves as a unique Eurasian people who somehow belong to neither Europe nor Asia. When was the Russian state founded? The original Russian state was founded in the 9th century, around the year 862. This would mean that Russia was founded about 600 years before Columbus landed in America. At this time in history, Slavic people lived in and around two communities, Novgorod and Kiev. Both of these towns lay along a chain of rivers and lakes that reached from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea, forming a rich trade route. According to the Russian Primary Chronicle, edited in the early 12th century, 3 Scandinavian brothers, Rurik, Sinus, and Truvor, came with their followers to the land of Rus in 860. They were called Varangians, or Vikings, and they originated in Scandinavia. They came as a response to an invitation from the people of Novgorod. Our whole land is great and rich, but there is no order in it. Come to rule and reign over us. So the Varangian brother, Prince Rurik, became celebrated as the original founder of the main princely line. Another Varangian prince, Oleg, established his capital at Kiev, becoming the first independent ruler of Kievan Rus in 882. What was the most important event in the emergence of early Russia? By far, the most important event in the emergence of early Russia was the adoption of Christianity as the official state religion. How did Christianity come to be the official state religion? In 988, Grand Prince Vladimir of Kiev decided that though he was wise and prudent, he and his country had no religion. So Vladimir sought counsel among his nobles and elders, who advised him to send 10 good and wise men to go see for themselves how each faith was practiced. In Constantinople, when they were taken to the huge cathedral of Hagia Sophia, with its interior completely decorated with mosaics of pure gold shimmering in the light of 10,000 candles, they were spellbound. We knew not whether we were in heaven or earth, and we are at a loss to describe it. We only knew that God dwells there among men, and their service is fairer than the ceremonies of nations, for we cannot forget their beauty. Shortly after that, in 988, Vladimir was baptized, made Christianity the official religion, and decreed that henceforth the Kievan land would adopt Christianity. As a result, the faith and culture of Eastern Orthodox Christianity replaced the pagan idols of Kiev. The Russians embraced the Eastern Christianity joyfully, with all the exuberance of their nature. What made the adoption of Christianity so important to the development of Russian culture? There are several reasons why the adoption of Christianity was so important. The first reason why it is so important is that the conversion to Christianity brought literacy to Russia. You see, before this time, there was no written language. The people communicated their Slavic language orally. Creating a written language would enable Christian missionaries to convert the people to Christianity. This is where I come in. The modern Cyrillic alphabet of 32 letters owes its name to Saint Cyril, that's me, and my brother, Saint Methodius. We both were the first to translate biblical texts into a Slavic dialect. My brother and I adapted Greek and Roman letters to the sounds of the Slavic language and created letters for unique sounds. The original alphabet was devised primarily to write down the liturgy and Bible teachings. This language became known as Old Church Slavonic. The second reason why the adoption of Christianity was so important is it was significant to the development of architecture. Cathedrals and churches quickly became the landmark of all Russian principalities, towns, and villages. In the earliest Russian churches, the domes were rounded, like those of Byzantine churches, but quickly they took on their distinctive onion bulb shape. Russia had yet another building tradition. This method involved building structures in wood. This is a picture of the Transfiguration Church, 1714, at Kiji. Built without nails, from wood hewn, only with an axe, this magnificent church on a remote island has onion domes. Its jagged shape is often compared to that of a fir tree. The third reason why the adoption of Christianity was so important was the development of the art and icon paintings. The word icon means image or likeness. Almost without exception, icons are unsigned. The name inscribed on the icon is that of the saint depicted. The peasants in Russia turned to icons as silent listeners for consolation. Icons were treated with great reverence and were handed down generation to generation because they were witnesses to all of a family's joys and sorrows. Those who could not read or write understood the language of old Russian art. People read the Gospels. Instead of language of the printed word, one read the language of colors. Christian art is a symbolic art. It shows that God has become visible. His image and that of each saint offers insight into the invisible and divine reality of the holy. Icon paintings stress the frontality of the figures, bringing the figure in a direct relationship with the viewer. Andrei Rublev was considered the greatest of all icon painters. Here we see icon paintings by Andrei Rublev. The adoption of Christianity also influenced the development of bell music into Russian society. Russians loved bells. From the 10th century on, Russians marked their days by the various pealing of bells. By the 16th century, bells were considered sacred instruments. How did Russia grow to be a great prosperous nation of Kiev, Novgorod, and Moscow? The Kievan kingdom, which so creatively took on the Christianity of Byzantium, was ruled from the city of Kiev. The Kievans were prosperous traders, taking honey, amber, wax, and furs down the meandering rivers to Constantinople, from which they returned with silks and objects of art. Kiev in the 10th and 11th centuries was one of the wealthiest and most animated cities of Europe, larger than Paris, who at the time had 80,000 inhabitants and twice as large as the small city of London. Although the greatest, Kiev was not the only important city of early Russia. In the north stood the city-state of Novgorod. It was the heart of a huge trading empire, which at its height stretched from the Baltic Sea to the Ural Mountains. The prosperous Novgorod merchants traveled both in Europe and Asia. Citizens in Novgorod developed a distinctive architectural style. It is they who are often credited with designing the first onion-shaped dome. Along with the development of Kiev and Novgorod came the development of a new city. Moscow was founded in 1147 as a military outpost in a region called Muscovy. It was close to several rivers, which gave it access to the Volga River and the Caspian Sea. Moscow was gradually becoming the most powerful city in Russia. But while Russia was growing and developing a culture of its own, the Mongols had their conquering eye on the Russian state. The Mongols, later known as Tartars who were from Asia, began invading Russia in 1237. The Mongols captured town after town. Finally, in 1240, they stormed the city of Kiev, destroyed it completely, and killed almost all of its inhabitants. Even the city of Moscow was burned 6 times. The Mongols ruled Russia for the next 250 years. They chose not to rule Russia directly, but allowed Russian princes to manage the day-to-day affairs, providing them with opportunity to pay taxes, custom duties, fees, and tolls to the Great Khan. How did the Mongols, Tartar, invasion influence history and culture? Under the Mongols' rule, thousands of words found their way into the Russian language, and most importantly, Russians accepted the Mongols' way of government, which demanded obedience to one man. One such man was Grand Prince Ivan III. In 1480, he refused to pay taxes to the Mongols, and the Mongols' domination of the Russians ended. What was Ivan III's contribution to Russian history? In 1485, Ivan III had the Kremlin built in Moscow to help present further Tatar-Mongol attacks. Kremlin means fortress. Later, Tsars expanded and improved the Kremlin many times, erecting palaces, churches, and governmental buildings. Ivan III gathered Russian princes and their lands, assumed authority over the Russian Orthodox Church, and expanded Moscow's territory to include Novgorod. For these achievements, he was called Ivan the Great. Ivan III's grandson, Ivan IV, was the first ruler to be crowned not as a Grand Duke, but as a Tsar, or Emperor of all Russia. Tsar comes from the Latin Caesar. Ivan IV continued to broaden the empire. The Volog region south to the Caspian Sea came under Russian control, and the Russians began to move into Siberia. He made new laws that favored the people and improved trade and relations with European nations and with Turkey. Ivan IV is also known as Ivan the Terrible. After the death of his beloved wife, he led a reign of terror in which he murdered hundreds of princes and landowners. He seized their estates and distributed lands to his followers. In a fit of rage, he even killed his own son. The seized estates were worthless without the peasants to work them. So Ivan and the Tsars that followed him passed decrees which forbade the peasants to leave the estates on which they worked. The peasants were called serfs. Serfdom was a form of slavery. What happened during the time of trouble? After Ivan IV's death in 1584, a series of rulers quarreled over Russia's throne. This period was called the Time of Trouble. The Time of Trouble was marked by civil war, famine, and invasion. This turmoil continued until 1613, when a council elected a noble named Mikhail Romanov as Tsar. This began the Romanov dynasty that would rule Russia for the next 300 years.
Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Sophia. However, many of you know me as Catherine the Great. I will accompany you as you journey through Imperial Russia. Let's start with my predecessor, Peter I, better known as Peter the Great. What fascinated Peter when he was a boy? At an early age, Peter became fascinated by the foreigners he met in Moscow's German quarter. They told him of Amsterdam, London, and Frankfurt, where Western Europeans were making huge strides forward in shipbuilding, printing, medicine, and armaments. Peter was eager to learn and use that learning to help his backward country. He traveled across Western Europe in disguise so that he could observe what life in the West was like for ordinary people. Why did Peter want to help to modernize Russia? Peter's major purpose was to westernize his backward country and to bring to the people the advantages of Western technology. In order to accomplish this, Peter traveled to the capitals of Western Europe and convinced many artisans, craftsmen, and technicians to return to Russia with him. In 1703, Peter moved the capital city from Moscow to a new city that he had ordered to be built. He named this city St. Petersburg, after his patron saint. How did Peter the Great reform Russia? Peter implemented several important reforms which brought Russia into the modern age. Military reform, reform of the government, reform of economics, and of education. Peter pushed forward his military reforms first, because as soon as he returned home, he faced a war with the Swedish king, Charles XII. His greatest military reforms, however, were in the area of power. Beginning with one obsolete and leaky ship, he constructed a powerful modern fleet. A new textile industry was created that benefited from Peter's knowledge of Western technology. He also developed mining and metallurgy, a process of working with metals to purify them and shape them into objects, so that Russia was self-sufficient in arms. To finance his reforms, Peter established a head or soul tax on the peasantry. A great believer in education, Peter opened vocational schools as well as schools of mathematics, navigation, engineering, medicine, and artillery. He established a Russian Naval Academy and founded the Academy of Science. The Russian alphabet was simplified. Arabic numerals were introduced, newspapers in the Russian language were published, and education was made compulsory for children of the nobility. St. Petersburg was built by forced peasant labor. Many died constructing huge buildings on the swampy land. The city was also populated by force. All officials and members of nobility were ordered to build houses in St. Petersburg. Peter was selective in what he chose to introduce to Russia. His reforms were enjoyed by only the tiny percentage of the population in the upper class. His reforms caused the division between the peasants and the nobility to grow. The westernized upper classes saw the Russian peasantry as ignorant and superstitious. The peasants became known as the dark people. Nevertheless, for better or worse, Peter's Russia began the 18th century as a powerful new actor on the stage of world history. Who ruled Russia after Peter? It is an irony of history that Peter, the most masculine of rulers, was to be succeeded by a series of women. Catherine I, Peter's widow and second wife, after the rule of Peter II, Anna, the niece of Peter the Great, immediately followed by Elizabeth, Peter the Great's daughter, and after the short reign of Peter III, there was yours truly, Catherine II. The four empresses ruled for 2/3 of a century between them. What were Elizabeth's significant contributions to Russia? While Elizabeth ruled Russia, she opened the first public theaters and made operas and ballets very popular. She founded the first university in Moscow and the Academy of Arts in St. Petersburg, the new Summer Palace, Peterhof, the Cathedral of the Resurrection in the Smolny Convent, Tsarskoye Selo, Great Palace. I was a German princess who, at the age of 15, married Grand Prince Peter, later Tsar Peter III. I should say that I became one of Russia's most successful rulers. My reign was marked by spectacular success abroad, important internal reforms, and the consolidation of the social order. I continued westernizing Russia, the process begun by Peter the Great. Under my reign, Russia grew to be a major power in European politics. How did I reform Russia? Unlike Peter, I was more interested in ideas, culture, and education. I encouraged the development of medicine and scientific discoveries and established a legislative commission to write up Russian laws. I patronized artists and writers. I initiated the translation of a great body of European literature into Russian, and it was I who decreed the introduction of a modern system of general schools. I founded the famous Hermitage Museum of Foreign Art in St. Petersburg, which helped the public to appreciate both Western art and their own heritage. It was also during my reign that St. Petersburg became a city of breathtaking beauty and culture. Many architectural masterpieces were built at that time. The magnificent Winter Palace, the monument of the Bronze Horseman, the Pavlovsky Palace, Troitsky Cathedral of the Trinity, and many more. Why do people think that I was such a controversial figure in Russian history? I have to admit that just as Peter's reforms were enjoyed by only the members of the upper class, so too the vast majority of Russians were little affected by my interest in the enlightenment of culture and education. For the poor Russian serf, life remained as hard as it had always been, and even became worse. Many Russians questioned how long a society could survive in which a tiny group of wealthy nobles ruled millions for their own benefit. The ruling class held all the power and almost all the wealth. 19 out of 20 Russians were peasant serfs. Alexander II organized banks, built railroads, aided schools, and gave more freedom to the press. Even so, Alexander II is remembered for his role in freeing the serfs. For this reason, he was called the Tsar Liberator. Why did the emancipation of the serfs fail to improve the lives of the serfs? The freed serf remained desperately poor. To make matters worse, they had to pay for the land they farmed. What were the conditions in Russia which led to the revolution? The dramatic reforms of Alexander II were followed by the harshly conservative rule of Alexander III. The attitudes of Alexander III were largely shaped by the assassination of his reforming father. Alexander III became reactionary, bitterly opposing any concessions to the demand of further reform. When Alexander III died, his son, Nicholas II, became the next Tsar. By 1900, Russia could boast of over 2 million industrial workers, better known as the proletariat. Poorly paid and crowded into disease-infested slums, their death rate was the highest among industrial workers in the world. Although prohibited from organizing into unions to work for better conditions, they nevertheless went on strike with increasing frequency. On January 22, 1905, the workers of St. Petersburg decided to address Tsar Nicholas II about their needs. Unarmed, they assembled before the Tsar's winter palace. Before they could state their request, the Tsar's soldiers opened fire. Hundreds of workers were slaughtered. After this Bloody Sunday massacre, opposition against the Tsar grew. Racked by the growing pains of industrialization and the urgent call for political reform, Tsarist Russia blundered on into the jaws of World War I. World War I began in 1914. The Russian army suffered many casualties. In late February 1917, shortages of bread and coal led to demonstrations and riots in the frozen streets of Petrograd. Petrograd was the name given to the city during World War I because St. Petersburg sounded too German. When troops were sent to suppress the movement, they joined it instead. Nicholas II was forced to abdicate the throne. Thus ended the rule of the Romanovs. This episode is known as the February Revolution. The Romanov Tsars had ruled Russia for 300 years. While Russia experienced great territorial expansion, wealth and power. But now the Romanovs, born out of one time of trouble, were destroyed in the midst of another.